Good evening, everyone. My name is Trey Ulrich. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Alumni Relations at LaSalle. And I want to welcome you to our first virtual alumni event of 2020, and probably the first one we've ever done in history besides a couple other webinars on LinkedIn. Tonight's topic, surviving the Panini Press, strategies for balancing remote work and emergency homeschool without getting too burned. It's being hosted by Jaime Longo. Jaime is a fellow classmate of mine. She earned her Ph.D. from Temple and is presently the executive director of the De La Salle Institute at LaSalle University, which helps train our faculty and staff on various online learning, LaSalle mission topics, and a whole bunch of, she also teaches creative writing too in the English department. So the other co-host for tonight is Deborah Franke, who will be on the chat feature. So if you have questions on the side, please send them along to the chat, and we will interject with questions throughout the presentation. And Deborah will moderate that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jaime, and thank you very much, Jaime.
Sure, thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. Our topic for today is, as Trey said, surviving the Panini Press. I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm being pressed from both sides under these quarantine conditions. And so Trey asked if I would share some of the insights that I've developed over the last couple of weeks, and I'm happy to share that for you. One of the things that I want to let you know is that if you look in the chat window, there's a link to a bunch of resources that I'm going to present tonight, including the slides that I'm going to share with you, and a bunch of other materials that I'm going to mention in passing that you might find interesting and helpful. So please feel free to take a look at those if anything I mentioned seems like it might be of value. So I wanted to start by kind of giving us a little bit of an overview to talk a little bit about our collective challenge, and I'll give you just a tiny window into the challenge in my particular household and what that might look like. And I know in some ways it will mirror yours, and in other ways your households will be very different. I want to talk about what I'm starting to really see as the #1 priority in all of this. I will share with you a strategy toolbox. It is certainly not the only set of tools that are out there, but it certainly seems to be the things that are floating to the surface among the people that I'm connected to on my various social media feeds, both in real life, the people that I know in my everyday life, but also what I'm seeing sort of trending in wider ways. And then just a little bit about making peace with our new normal, because every day is going to be a little bit different, and we're going to keep needing to massage all of this as we go. So, as I'm sure you noticed, our new coworkers aren't so great about personal space and office etiquette or the concept of deadlines. And so, you'll see some of these images are clearly stock images. There's an awful lot more smiling than you might guess, but in the upper corner is kind of our real life exemplar, the BBC correspondent whose live feed on the BBC was interrupted by his 2 absolutely adorable children. And while that was very entertaining when he was the only person being affected by this sort of thing, now that is our everyday existence, we need to think about ways to mitigate that in whatever ways that we can. So let's talk a little bit about what that might look like. So as I mentioned, what I'm starting to see is the real priority here is really this focus on mental health and relationships. There has been a lot of talk in therapeutic circles in the last couple of days about how grief, loss, and anxiety are surging at the moment. All of us, but especially our children, are missing our routine. Children in particular are missing their friends. So there's a lot of, with this first week being over and they're realizing that this is going to be a longer period of time and they don't know when they're going to get to see their friends again, there's increasing reports of of children breaking down around those kinds of things. Older children in particular are missing events. As we know, teenagers are missing dances, they're missing athletic events, they're missing potentially prom and graduation and all those kinds of things. And that is a source of grief and loss for them. And all of us are experiencing something that trauma therapists and people who specialize in grief refer to as anticipatory grief. It tends to be the kind of thing that you see among family members when someone gets a truly bad prognosis medically. You know something bad is going to happen, you don't know exactly when, and it kind of feels like that sword is about to fall, but we don't know exactly when. And we are all kind of living in this state of anticipatory grief at this moment. And my family is no different there, with perhaps even a few extra layers. So with the things that I'm going to share with you tonight, one of the things that I want to make especially certain to emphasize here are that my kids are not Stepford children. And that the things that I'm sharing with you are not things that work 100% of the time. And that I'm also balancing some special needs with my children. They are foster children we're fostering to adopt. And in addition to their trauma history, they have some educational special needs. And I'll touch a little bit more on that and why it's affecting the way that we set our schedule up the way that we did when we get to that in a little bit. But what I want to emphasize here is that our everyday is full of negotiation. It's full of meltdowns. There was an awful lot of whining today. So I am not presenting myself as an expert who has put this in place and now my household is running beautifully and I'm doing this balance perfectly, because it's not, and I'm not. But what I have really tried to internalize here is this message of prioritizing relationships. And I'm going to share a little bit from a friend who is a certified trauma therapist, who was sharing in some private correspondence some ideas that I think are really important for all of us to share. And so I'm going to share a little bit of it now, but it is, what I'm about to read to you is in the resources that I mentioned. So she said that that one thing that we as the parents and adult figures in children's lives need to be careful about is managing our own emotions as it relates to this grief and loss and anxiety, because of course we're experiencing these same things. And that doesn't mean being stoic. It doesn't mean hiding all of those things from them. But it does mean not going overboard and not letting our grief and loss and anxiety express themselves in frustration and anger with them. Because what's very likely to happen here is we're carrying all of this grief and loss and anxiety, and our children are doing something that is relatively minor and kind of annoying, and it's the tripwire for that grief and loss and anxiety to come flooding out of us, but then it winds up inadvertently targeting them, when of course we know that they are not the source of the grief and loss and anxiety right now. So what my colleague was explaining was that it's okay to normalize for them that that feeling afraid and sad and normal is very, I'm sorry, afraid or sad or upset is very normal right now. And she has been really emphasizing the fact that ultimately this is a form of trauma for them and really for us. And that ultimately all of the things that I'm going to tell you about routines and schedules and everything, it's important and it's worth putting into place. But that ultimately, if it comes down to stressing about homework not getting done or falling behind in school or the house is a mess or they're underfoot, you're losing your own mind. If it's coming down to that and saying, to heck with this, forget the schedule, forget the routine, not permanently, but for today, we're going to walk away and have a pillow fight or make a cake or do whatever, that's okay. That's actually what's needed in that moment. So the rest of the toolbox and strategies that I'm going to emphasize here exist within that framework, they are useful. They are tools that we should try to implement because they do have important developmental value, but ultimately that relationship is primary. and that we want to make sure that the core of all of what we're doing with them is this strong and healthy attachment parenting. And some of the messages that she said were really important. They're important always. When I say some of these things, I hope that many of you will probably think, well, of course, obviously, but especially in this moment in time, she says that we want to be conveying, I love you, you're important, you matter, I see you as competent, which I think is particularly important for older children when, you know, they're struggling with their geometry or trying to get some kind of schoolwork done that isn't going well. And, you know, our impulse might be to say, for goodness sake, why can't you do this? To try to reframe that in seeing them as competent. And really at the base of that is, I'm going to be here for you whenever you need me. So all of the other things I'm going to say exist within that framework. And if and when we need to step away from those other things, we want to go back to that relationship piece. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this toolbox for survival. For me anyway, my toolbox of choice at the moment has these 4 key components. The first one is making a schedule. The second is setting up go-to options, having lots of things that I can pull out at a moment's notice to negotiate or adjust on the fly when I need to. The third one is moving your bodies, yours too, but especially theirs. And the fourth one is including creative outlets. So it's really easy at this moment to say, okay, well, they're not in school, we have to replicate school, but sometimes you really do need to just throw it all out the window and bake a cake or make a kite or, you know, whatever it happens to be. So let's talk a little bit about some of these. Rules are good. Rules help control the fun, as Monica Geller would say. And one of the things that developmental psychologists and pediatricians are very clear on. There is a lot of stuff that's been published in the last couple of weeks, some of which I included in the resource guide for you, that routine and structure is really important. It's important in general, and it's especially important right now when it feels like every ounce of structure has gone out the window. But what that structure looks like will vary widely depending on each person's family, depending on the age of the children, depending on the particular needs that you have going on in your household. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways that the structure and routine might look, but there's not a right way. There's the way that works best for your family. And so you might find that you're taking little pieces out of different places. You might find that your routine looks completely different than this. But even my friends who said things at the beginning like, oh, I can just keep the routine in my head, by the end of the first week, we're starting to structure things more specifically because they were finding that, in fact, the having something written that other people could look at had value for them and for their children. And the other thing that I would point out here is that the schedule is for you as much or more as it is for them, because of course we're not just talking about homeschooling here. We are remote working. And so how do you balance those two pieces of things? So when you're thinking about a schedule, you should be thinking about your needs, not just their needs. So when are you typically most productive? That's the time that you're typically most productive. That's when their free time should be. That's when you should hand them some screens and get them as far away from you as you safely can in your living space. Ask yourself, when are they typically most focused? And if that's possible, try to keep yourself free or free-ish when that is happening. That's the point in time to schedule the schoolwork that needs the most grown-up intervention. And you know, a lot of educators are saying at this point that, and a lot of homeschoolers are saying at this point that when you're in a one-on-one setting, half an hour to an hour can be a sufficient amount of real academic time in a day. It does not have to be the 6 hours or whatever that they typically spend in school. Part of needing them to be in school for 6 hours is that their teachers have classrooms of 20 to 30 kids. And if you're going to get all of them through something, then that's going to take a little while. But when it's you and your child, you can productively get through something really important and have a meaningful learning experience in a much shorter amount of time. And then mindful that screen time of all kinds, even educational screen time, has some potential problems that go along with it. what can you offload to an app? So if your district has sequenced self-running curriculum programs, you want to budget a chunk of time in your day for your child to complete those programs if you can. And if your school district doesn't have that kind of access, many educational software companies are now offering free access to their products during this social isolation period. And so see what you can get them set up on. One of the benefits there is that those programs tend to be dynamic. So it's not that every child is going through the same sequence this week. It's that your child is doing a program that's tailored to her educational level at this moment, which means that it's better mapping on to, let me try that again. So it means that your child is less likely to be bored because the material is pitched actually where they are, and they're less likely to be so completely frustrated because the material is too far ahead of them. And so those kinds of programs that really assess where the child is right now can continue to push them ahead, continue to teach them new concepts, continue to have them make advances without necessarily requiring a ton of hands-on time from you. And I will say, my school district does have access to those programs. My children have been putting in the amount that the school district is recommending in each one each day. And they call me in sometimes, stuck on a concept here, they get stuck on a concept there. My son was trying to learn idioms this morning. I don't know if you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy, but he is very Drax-like, he is very literal. And so he was really struggling with that idea today. So that required a little bit more intervention from me, but many times he can go through his whole half hour in that program and not request additional assistance at all. So some of it is a negotiation on a day-to-day basis. So I want to show you a couple of schedules, and I did try to give a range so that we can kind of see what this might look like for a wide range of ages. So for these visual schedules, first of all, I have to give enormous props to my friend and colleague, Dr. Catherine Holliquist, who is in our art department at LaSalle. She has twin, I believe they're 4-year-olds. They are pre-reading at this point, and so she put together visual schedules for them so that they can see in the morning, Daddy is in charge, they're supposed to get dressed, they're supposed to make their beds, they're supposed to put their pajamas in the dresser, they're supposed to brush their teeth, and they're supposed to wash their hands. And I did include something from late, this is not their entire schedule, but I did want to show you later in the day, at 9 o'clock, mommy takes over. There's some outside time scheduled. So she really tried to represent the flow of their day so that they could see how those things went. She did ask me to emphasize to you that the schedule does not work entirely as planned. It is more of a suggestion than an actual enforced routine. But she said it has helped, especially in terms of kind of keeping them aware of the flow of the day. So that is one kind of visual schedule that I wanted to show you. Many of you have probably seen this. It went viral very early on. It's sort of the base schedule for school-age kids in terms of what this might look like. It's what I used when I was designing the schedule for my own kids. Just in terms of categories, I think that it is helpful. The time frames might not work for you. Where things are scheduled in the day might not work for you. But the categories of things I thought were useful in thinking about what you might want a school-age child to be doing. I wanted to show you a couple of other possibilities for school-age time, particularly things that included other categories than what that viral schedule was representing. Both in terms of the amount of time allotted to academic work, and one of the things that you'll see is that there's a lot of variation there, and that makes sense to me. There's no one amount of time that people should be spending on academic work. And so, this schedule, for instance, has a little bit amount of time. It's probably 2 total hours to specifically academic work. And a little bit of time for things that sort of fall into that category. Creative time includes certainly some activities that could be considered learning activities, even if they're more hands-on. And quiet time also includes some activities that could be construed as learning activities. This schedule does continue on into the evening, but I just wanted to show you that middle block. One of the reasons that I included this one, and of course this one has a morning piece to the schedule, and most of the academic work is in the morning. But the piece that I wanted to show you here, first of all, is how much time in the afternoon of this schedule is not academic. Again, thinking about the different ebbs and flows and of how this might look, I really wanted to emphasize that my point here is not to say kids need to be sitting down at a desk all day working, that there's a lot of ways to put this together. But the thing that I like most about this schedule is this chunk at the bottom that is just a list of things that the kids could do that do not necessarily require intervention from a parent. Obviously, this isn't the only list, but hopefully it's something that will stop the child, at least initially, from saying I'm bored, to at least look at one of these options before we proceed from there. Trey mentioned to me that there were parents of teenagers who would likely be in this session. And so I did spend some time today researching what the recommendations are for teenagers. And I did put a fair number of resources, specifically teenager related, in the file that I shared with you all. But for me, the most convincing piece of information that I found in this research was that teenagers, and I'm going to say this and then I'm going to contextualize it, that teenagers should make their own schedules. That does not mean that they should have the freedom to say, today I'm going to play video games from morning until night. That the literature is clear that they too need routine, and that their routine does need to have some ebbs and flows, but that they should be given some parameters and then be allowed to make their schedule within those parameters. So this is kind of an example. I'm going to give you a set of blocks. Again, these are not the only potential blocks that you could give. I'm going to give some durations that go along with those blocks. And then I'm going to ask my teenager to decide what block do I want where and how much time am I going to allot to it. And you can see the note here provides some additional parameters that allow for some negotiation. We're going to try the draft schedule for a week. We're going to see how it goes. Maybe we'll need to tweak some things. It provides some family level information. So the family in general is probably going to have lunch between 12 and 12:30 and probably have dinner between 6 and 7. This family is going to allow the teenager to decide whether to join the family for lunch, but is being nice about it, but requesting the teenager's presence at dinner time. And is also offering a possibility for the teenager to get some more free time by bundling fresh air and family time in the afternoon. So by taking some responsibility for siblings in the afternoon and taking them outside to play so that they have some supervision that does not require a parent, that gives some more space for the teenager to maybe have some more time on social media, have some more time playing video games, whatever else that teenager might want to do with free time. And so one of the pieces that really goes along with the idea of teenagers need structure, but they also need autonomy. So how do you find the middle road between that? And the idea of giving them a template and then allowing them some room to negotiate seems to be the key to this particular one. So what I want to show you is the schedule that I put together for my kids in particular, and then talk to you a little bit about the negotiation that we're doing. So because our schedule is going to look a little odd to a lot of people, and I want to explain why it's so important to do you. So we have been starting our academic day at 9 in the morning. I am a night owl. My very strong preference when my work allows me to do so is to get the bulk of my mental work done between 10 o'clock at night and 2 o'clock in the morning. My real life non-pandemic schedule does not let me do that because I have to be up to get the kids ready for school and then get them to school. But if I don't actually have to be somewhere and they don't actually have to be somewhere, then I'm going to put a schedule together that really works for my natural flow in terms of my workflow. And I'm going to talk about the other ways in which that helps me. So the other piece is that my daughter, like me, is not a morning person. So this schedule allows her to get the block of sleep that matters most to her, to wake up mostly on her own or closer to on her own as usual, and then have her be cheery at 9 o'clock in the morning instead of grouchy at 7, the way that she usually is. I have been trying to alternate actual academic time with some other kind of activity. So you'll see we have a block here of academic time from 9 to 10. I'll show you one of their sample lesson plans in a minute, but typically they do one of their online school programs, and then they do some, Scholastic has made a lot of resources available for free online. So then they do some Scholastic work in the morning. We do a block of quiet time. That's something I pulled straight out of that sample schedule. I try to be really specific, and in fact, I'm being more directive now. So they both start with a reading assignment that I give them at the beginning of quiet time, but it usually only takes them 10 to 15 minutes, and then they have this block of time that they can do anything. My daughter painted this morning. And during both of those times, I do my best to get through the work that I can get through. There are some interruptions. What I'm finding is that it hasn't actually been too bad. I was on a conference call yesterday morning from 10 to 10:45. I only got interrupted once or twice. It could definitely have been worse. I deliberately put morning exercise smack in the middle of our morning because I'm hoping to get some of their wiggles out. And so we go for a long neighborhood walk if we can. We did that today. Yesterday it was raining. We did some yoga. And it definitely gets some of that need to move out of their system. Our lunch is a little on the earlier side, a little earlier than I would like actually, because my son's teacher is doing remote sessions. So now his 12 o'clock academic time is remote session. I have my daughter do some more online stuff or some more reading stuff. I built in chore time, also something I stole right from that sample schedule. It has been going really well. I told them exactly what I wanted them to do. Most of the time they finish well within, with enough time in that half an hour to have some break time. Or sometimes to say we want to do more chores, which is great. Here, take a Swiffer, go see what you can do, wipe off the stairs, doesn't matter. I built in a time for educational videos. It's usually science and social studies, not always. It depends on what they're in the mood for that day, what else I happen to have found trolling the internet. Built in some social time, so they have some time to do FaceTime or Duo, Zoom, depending on who they want to talk to, and then back to academic work. And some of our afternoon academic schedules are built around my son's teacher's schedule. So we had to, it looks a little different than it did the first week because we had to change some things, but it seems to be working pretty well. My daughter is only 6. She gets tired by the end of the afternoon. And we've been negotiating for her to mostly be done her work somewhere between 2 and 3. So I'll still give her something to do in that 4 o'clock block, but it tends to be less mentally challenging, basically. We try to do a fresh air block in the middle of the afternoon. They do one more block of academic work, and then they're done. At 5 o'clock, they can do whatever devices they want. They can do more FaceTime if they want, but the rule for free time is you have to be away from where I'm working, because the bulk of the work that I'm doing now is actually during their free time and during my mental flourishing late in the evening. And I have the flexibility to do that. That is when I'm most available. And so I encourage you to think early in putting together the schedule. When are you freshest? When are you able to be most productive, and make that their free time? For me, it happens to be when they're in bed, but it gives me a little bit more flexibility during the day to be able to answer their questions, to be able to walk away for a minute, to be able to put a load of laundry in. But I could bundle some more of these other things if I needed to into a time when I would be more productive in order to get them out of my workspace if I needed to. One other thing that I wanted to point out, because I really want to emphasize this do you thing, our bedtime is really late, and it's really late because of their experiences before they came to us. They already have a later bedtime than most of their friends. This is later than it would ordinarily be, because, again, who's getting up to do anything in the morning? But to make this seem like a little bit of a treat, we did extend their bedtime a little bit, and we're really able to build in this before bedtime, snuggle reading, family game night time that has been going really well. And so that is also something that I would encourage you to capture if you can. So I did promise to show you a little bit about, this is my son's, a sample from my son's schedule. One of the things that I learned was to be as directive as possible. So he has a copy of the schedule in front of him all day, every day. The exact assignments change, but it spells out for him. I spend time over the weekend mapping out for him exactly what he's supposed to do every day. There is negotiating room here. So if he pulls up Scholastic, offers 4 things every day for kids in his grade range. And I usually assign him 2. So let's say, and I'm guessing which 2 he might want to do. So let's say he logs in and sees burger bugs and says, oh, which in fact he did do, and says, can I read the other article instead? Yes, probably. I'm going to sign off on you picking this other Scholastic article that's in there. During the science and social studies time, Cincinnati has been doing these great home safari videos where a keeper walks you around an exhibit and features a particular animal. So I don't want to watch the porcupine today. Can we watch the sloth? Sure, I don't care. What difference does it make? To have that level of flexibility is really helpful here. The other piece that I have, you'll see some references to worksheets. Both kids have a folder full of worksheets, some of which were provided by the district, most of which I was able to find myself by looking for stuff around the topics that they have been studying. And so at any point in the day, pretty much, they can, except for the online stuff, the Lexia and iReady, which are the programs that the district provides, those I really want them to do their 30 minutes every day. But, you know, if my daughter says, I don't want to do any more Scholastic, can I do a phonics worksheet? Yeah, go for it. Do a phonics worksheet, put it in the folder. I'll put a sticker on it later. You know, everyone is happy. But because I have all of those things there really easy for them to get, it makes it a lot easier to do that negotiation and be flexible, and to have some sense of what I feel comfortable substituting at any moment. My daughter, for instance, I assign her a couple of books at her reading level every day to read. If she doesn't want to read Ham and Sal and the Very Good Smell, she wants to read A New Job for Stu, go for it. Doesn't really, no skin off my nose. Pick a book, go and read it. Not that big of a deal. So the more options that you can give them and the more sense that you can give them some autonomy over what they're doing, the less resistance you might find with some of these things. All right. Talking about negotiation, right? The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules here, right? The schedule is malleable. It can adjust based on the needs at the given moment. Sometimes those needs are technological. My son tried to log into a remote learning session the other day, and we had an enormous amount of trouble getting into his teacher's room, and that whole session wound up running late as a result. It did not throw off the rest of my schedule. We just adjusted. We made a little tweak here, we made a little tweak there. Maybe it's an extraordinarily beautiful day and everybody wants to go outside at a time that you would not ordinarily plan to do that. Maybe it's raining and so you decide to push your fresh air time to a different time in your day. Having a schedule, doing that planning in advance, it allows you to improvise within that structure. I've been thinking about it as improvising within a theme. Once you have the theme, once you have the structure, it makes it a lot easier to on the fly shift things around and feel comfortable saying, I don't mind ditching this for today. I'm gonna stick to my guns on that, but it doesn't have to happen at the same time. So those are things that I would encourage people to think a little bit about. So what might that mean? Pull together as much as possible. Did your school send anything home? I'm in the Philadelphia School District. Right now, they are not quite as helpful as I would like them to be. Not so much for my own sake, but for my children's friends' sake, who might not have the same resources I do to pull these things together. Earlier this year, did you happen to get any enrichment workbooks? There is a ton of stuff available free online. So if you have some sense of the particular things that your child was studying, or even if you just look for first grade worksheets, fifth grade worksheets, there is a lot of stuff out here. But the key is to put it all in a central place. One place that they can go to every day and say, okay, I'm going to pull my things from there. One of the things that our teachers have been doing is what they're calling offering choice boards. In Philadelphia, at least at the moment, none of the things that the teachers are sharing with us are mandatory, and that's for complicated equity issues that are sort of beyond the scope of this webinar. But what they're doing instead is laying out a range of options and saying, try to do 3 of these every day, or try to do 7 of them every week. And the concept of a choice board is a really useful one in general. I'm not doing it quite as explicitly. I'm not saying to my children, here is your choice board for the day. But what we're learning in our negotiation is that essentially I'm putting together a choice board for them. Read this book or that book. Do some scholastic or pick some worksheets. But having that kind of setup is useful. I would say have backups for your backups. That is definitely something that I have learned in the last couple of weeks. The tech will fail. The Skype a Scientist live stream you wanted them to do will max out and they won't be able to get in. They'll be bored with yesterday's material and won't want to keep working on it today. If you've got accessible backups for them to swap in and swap out, that will make that less emotionally charged for all of you. There definitely has come a point in every day where I'm just like, yep, okay, all right, do whatever. And that has been working out okay because there are so many things around that they can choose from. Just want to point out some of the images on the bottom of the screen are resources that may be of use to you. So as I mentioned, Scholastic has put together, I don't know who is designing their units, those people deserve a raise. They have put together units for preschool through 9th grade. There are materials and activities that go along with every day's activities. So for first graders, it's usually a fiction book, a nonfiction book, a video, and an activity. And there are some like quizzes and stuff that go around those, but you don't have to do those pieces if you don't want to. For my son who's in 3rd grade, there are 4 assigned articles every day. Usually there are videos along with some of those articles. And then they all have, it's called a path to further learning or journey to further learning or something like that, where there are journaling questions or math problems or things like that. Whoever's putting together the stuff for 3rd to 5th grade has done an amazing job of balancing reading support with math, with social studies, and with science, so that if you had them do all 4 of those things every day, they would be getting in some ways a more robust exposure to those subjects than certainly my children are getting in the school that they're in right now. And so that could be a really valuable resource as well for you. And right now they are making that available totally free. The only downside is that they're not necessarily releasing, they're releasing 1 week of resources at a time, which means that you might have to scramble on Sunday to get ready for the coming week, which is what I had to do this past week. Draw Every Day and Lunch Doodles with Mo Willems are both drawing live casts that are happening daily. I believe Mo Willems is doing them at 1 p.m., 1 Eastern time every day, and JJK is doing them every day at 2. And so they're great ways both for kids to learn how to draw and to get to not talk to, but sort of feels like an intimate conversation with a real artist. And then the Cincinnati Zoo, along with now a number of other zoos, are doing these home safaris where they're highlighting different animals and various kinds of things. I put a whole bunch of resources like that into a file in the link that I shared in the chat. So that is definitely something that everyone has access to. So the 2 other things that I mentioned, I'm not going to talk about in as quite great length, but one is move your bodies. If at all possible to get outdoors in a safe and socially distanced way, I would strongly encourage that, even if it's just a walk around the block. Recess is important, and giving them spaces to be outside if they can is really good. If being outdoors is not possible, either because it's raining or because it's not safe, or because you are concerned about someone either contracting the virus or passing on the virus, exercise and dance videos are very available in YouTube. And so, you know, they take gym class. You can put on an exercise video and call it an academic unit because, hey, they would be in class usually. So you can feel good about that decision. And then I would say include creative outlets. There are lots of ways of doing that. You can put on some Bob Ross. They can learn how to make some happy little trees. They can do lunch doodles with Mo Willems. They can practice writing haiku. One of the suggestions that I've seen for having children spend time with friends and family members over FaceTime and other things like that is to have people on both ends doing the same activity. So have a grandparent teach your child how to make something, and where they're cooking together, doing that kind of creative experience. My daughter had a fantastic time talking to my father while decorating a Mrs. Potato Head with modeling clay while I tried to pretend that I was not seeing that happen. Creative outlets are good, as long as they're not too messy. While in your workspace, try to accommodate that as best as possible. The reality is that you are not going to get as much done as you planned. One of the things that I saw the other day said that your productivity, I don't know whether you're familiar with the Pomodoro method. It was developed by, I'm blanking on his name, but it's called the Pomodoro method. I don't know if you've ever seen a little tomato timer, like kitchen timer. He experimented with different blocks of time for work productivity and then break time, and found in his experiments that 25 minutes of work time and 5 minutes of break time is the ideal for most people, and that that unit is called a Pomodoro. And so I was seeing a calculation the other day that said the number of Pomodoros that you can expect to accomplish during this time is the age of your youngest child minus one, and that you should, is the age of your youngest child, and then you should subtract a Pomodoro for every additional child. So my youngest child is 6. I have one additional child. That means that I can maybe get 5 hours of work done in a day while they're still around. And you know what? That's about right on. And so part of what we need to be realistic with ourselves about is how much productivity we can really expect, and then begin working with our jobs about what that might look like. Some jobs obviously are much more flexible than others about that, and much more realistic than others about that. And so one thing that I would say, if you're looking for advice and assistance on that side, is to check out askamanager.org, which is a great site in general. But Allison has really shifted to talking a lot about work in the time of coronavirus, and she's really great about providing scripts that one can use. And so she's been talking and writing a lot about these kinds of things, and has some really great scripts for how to self-advocate around that piece. The other piece of the reality is that they're not going to get as much work done as you had planned. And there are going to be days when it feels like nothing gets done, and that's okay. It is okay to take a walk, to paint a picture, to have the pillow fight, to play a board game, to pull up a mindfulness video and do it all together because you need to work on your mindfulness too, and try it again tomorrow. That's okay. You got to the end of the day, everyone is still alive, no one has melted down too badly, we'll try again tomorrow. That's a success, and we need to reframe it for ourselves to be that way. And then realistically, there's going to be yelling, there's probably going to be crying. We do love these small, frustrating coworkers. People might need quiet time. You might need to say sorry, they might need to say sorry. Sometimes you do need to hold the line, sometimes you need to let it go. You need to negotiate with yourself on a daily basis what that might look like. But being aware, keep trying to hold on to that that relational piece, and those healthy attachment parenting phrases is probably where to retreat to in those moments, and to acknowledge that this is part of the new normal, an uncomfortable part of the new normal, but a part of the new normal. So a couple of final thoughts, and then I'll answer questions if people have them. The first thing is that you're not alone. You're not exaggerating or imagining how difficult this is. It's especially difficult because we are socially isolated from our support systems. I would strongly suggest building those virtual connections with our real life friends. I've tried to do that for myself in a couple of different ways, and some of my friends have mentioned other things that they have done. So I created a group on Facebook for friends who are going through this. And we can share our successes, and there's been an awful lot of venting because we sometimes don't want to vent to our partners. We don't want to vent to our children. And so there is a need for people to have that space to say, today was terrible. Everything went wrong. She melted down during a religion test and it was horrible. That's a real thing that happened to one of my friends yesterday. It was awful. And to share that stress and get that reinforcement that it will be okay, that what everyone is experiencing at this moment is normal, and that we just have to try it again tomorrow. Another friend mentioned doing regular Google Hangouts with some friends. I did a Zoom session last week with a friend where, just to catch up. We were supposed to have had lunch. Instead of lunch, we had a Zoom session. So at least we got to talk a little bit and catch up that way. Definitely something to try to carve out for yourself, to give yourself that space. The balance thing, it's not balance within the day. At least not within most days. It's balance within the overall context. Maybe today is a day where you had to spend more time with the kids, and maybe tomorrow you try to find ways to spend more time on the job. The schedule might help to keep the tension in balance because it will have given you the space to think ahead, to be strategic about where you put things so that you have the best chance of being in balance. And then I can't understate the necessity of practicing self-care. Even when that means locking yourself in the bathroom for 15 minutes, as long as that is safe for your kid. If that's the only way to get a little bit of peace and quiet, then that's what you need to do. That form of being gentle with yourself is absolutely necessary, and is definitely something that you should try to take time for. Think about the ways that you can practice self-care. We're all washing our hands so much at this point. Find time to put lotion on. Those kinds of things, the tiniest little things, so that you are taking care of yourself in ways that matter. So I'm going to back us out of the presentation screen, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm happy to answer questions if people have them, or to clarify anything that I've shared.
I've tried to unmute everybody. Feel free to unmute yourself and either ask questions or share what seems to be working for you, or you can type into the chat box. The links, yeah, they are in the chat box. I will copy that again into the chat box.
I'm not seeing them.
And after this, for everybody who registered for the webinar, we'll be sending a link to the recording when it gets posted, and we'll include a link to the resources there as well. Any questions, or anybody who wants to talk about what seems to be working well for them? Everybody's all right. We got it. This was great. You are welcome. All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for tonight. Those of you with children at home, you're probably exhausted and
I bet.
ready to call it a day and rest up for tomorrow. So thanks so much for joining us, and just want to wish you the very best. We'll be doing webinars on various topics in the coming weeks, so stay tuned to your email for those. And again, thanks for participating tonight. Everybody have a good evening.